General Hospital will reveal Ava Jerome had always believed she was holding a powerful card. With her cold demeanor and sharp intellect, she was convinced she could manipulate everything to her advantage, especially once she discovered a devastating secret about Christina, one big enough to destroy Alexis Davis's family if exposed. The blackmail scheme she orchestrated was meticulous, cunning, and calculated. To Ava, this was more than just a financial opportunity, it was a chance to reclaim dominance after recent setbacks in the political chess game that was Port Charles. Upon learning that Christina might have deliberately cut the brake lines on Rick Lansing's car, an act that could easily be considered attempted murder, Ava wasted no time. She didn't rush to expose the truth. Instead, she quietly approached Alexis with circumstantial evidence, just enough to spark panic, but not enough for any legal defense. Ava knew how to press the right buttons, Alexis's guilt and maternal instinct. To turn fear into profit. At first, Alexis resisted. She believed Ava was exaggerating and trusted that no one could seriously accuse Christina with such flimsy evidence. But Ava escalated her threats. She warned that if Alexis didn't cooperate, she would go straight to Molly, Alexis's other daughter, who would be devastated to learn her sister had nearly killed their father. That threat struck deep, leaving Alexis shaken and cornered. In her desperation, Alexis turned to Diane Miller for advice. Diane, known for her sharp wit and pragmatism, saw the situation clearly. She proposed a controversial solution: commit Christina to a psychiatric facility like Shadybrook to protect her from prosecution and neutralize Ava's threats. Diane even prepared the legal paperwork, seeing it as the only way to preserve the family's dignity. Alexis reluctantly agreed. But during a quiet movie night with her daughters, filled with laughter and fleeting moments of peace, she began to feel a deep sense of remorse. Molly's trusting eyes made her realize that following through with the plan would mean betraying Christina and shattering the fragile harmony she had fought to rebuild. In the end, Alexis rejected Diane's advice and chose to cover up the truth, falling right into Ava's trap. She began making hush-money payments to keep Christina's secret buried. However, no scheme is ever truly airtight, and Ava underestimated Lucky Spencer. He wasn't just a close ally of Elizabeth Weber, who had nearly died in the crash, but also a man with a keen sense for investigation. Over time, Lucky began noticing inconsistencies in the accident report. Quietly, methodically, he pieced together the puzzle: Christina's actions, Alexis's strange behavior, and Ava's sudden leverage over them. But instead of going public, Lucky opted for a different path. He confronted Ava. On a gloomy afternoon near the old Windmere estate, he met her face to face. There was no shouting, no drama, just a cold warning. He calmly revealed that he knew everything about her blackmail scheme. More than that, he possessed a dark secret from Ava's past, an unsolved incident involving a death tied to Jerome Gallery. And Lucky had the proof to reopen that investigation. Ava was caught off guard. Though she had faced many adversaries before, she was unprepared to deal with Lucky, a man with nothing to lose and a relentless pursuit of justice. The look in his eyes, calm but deadly, told her this game was over. In that moment, Ava realized she had no choice but to back down. She dropped her demands, ended the blackmail, and quietly retreated to protect what little security she had left. Alexis, unaware of the full story behind Ava's sudden change of heart, still sensed that luck had, for once, been on her side. And the person who helped tip the scales wasn't loud, boastful, or seeking recognition. It was Lucky, a silent hero in the tangled web of secrets, threats, and redemption that was Port Charles. Although she had listened to and even partly agreed with Diane Miller's proposed plan, Alexis Davis ultimately couldn't bring herself to follow through. As a seasoned attorney, Alexis fully understood the logic behind Diane's suggestion: committing Christina to Shadybrook would not only shield her daughter from legal prosecution but also neutralize Ava Jerome's growing threats. Yet, reason alone could not overpower the deep pull of motherhood. No matter how troubled Christina had been, no matter how much damage she had caused, she was still Alexis's daughter, flesh and blood, and Alexis simply couldn't bring herself to lock her away in a psychiatric facility as if she were some stranger. Sleepless nights and quiet moments watching Christina trying to mend her relationship with Molly, especially after the loss of Sam, left Alexis overwhelmed with guilt and compassion. She couldn't bear to see another daughter lost, another bond severed. The thought of Molly finding out that her sister had nearly killed their father was too horrific to imagine. So instead of authorizing the legal papers Diane had prepared, Alexis quietly set them aside and chose the more dangerous path, paying off Ava in exchange for her silence. At first, Ava seemed satisfied with the initial payment. She likely thought she had won, outsmarting a woman known for her intellect and courtroom prowess. But Ava's greed had no limits. The moment she sensed Alexis's vulnerability, her desperation to protect her family at all costs, Ava seized the opportunity. She began demanding more, each time coming up with new reasons: the increased risk of exposure, the need to keep others silent, the delays in payment. Each demand came with a higher price tag, turning Alexis's efforts into an unending spiral of debt and anxiety. But Ava wasn't merely after money. She saw a bigger prize in Alexis's unraveling life. She began setting her sights on more: Alexis's relationships, her reputation, even her legacy. Ava knew all too well the skeletons in Alexis's closet and didn't hesitate to bring up past mistakes, reopening old wounds, and gradually eroding the confidence Alexis once carried so firmly. The strong, composed woman who had once stood unshaken in the courtroom was now cornered, emotionally exhausted, morally conflicted, and dangerously close to collapse. The situation grew more tense with each passing day. Alexis no longer had control over the secret she was desperately trying to contain. The payments escalated, the guilt deepened, and Ava grew bolder. No longer just a shadowy blackmailer, Ava became a looming presence in Alexis's life, her words sharper, her threats more calculated, her presence more suffocating. This was no longer a discreet extortion, it had evolved into a ruthless manipulation. And Alexis, trapped within the consequences of her own silence, could only hope that somehow, it would all end before everything came crashing down. But as always in Port Charles, no secret stays buried forever. Though confident and bold in her seemingly flawless blackmail scheme, Ava Jerome had no idea that, lurking in the shadows, Lucky Spencer had already uncovered the truth about what Christina had done. As a man with deep insight and a keen eye for detail, Lucky had been quietly observing everything unfold. He understood that if the truth were to come to light, everything would collapse, not just the fact that Christina had nearly killed Rick Lansing, but also Ava's entire extortion plan would be exposed and ruined. Patient and cautious by nature, Lucky didn't rush to make accusations. Instead, he spent time collecting clues, piecing together the oddities surrounding Rick's near-fatal accident and the strange behavior from Christina. Her restlessness, her evasive demeanor, and the whispered, tense conversations between her and Alexis. To most, these would be dismissed as stress or family drama, but to Lucky, it all pointed to something far darker. Slowly, a disturbing picture emerged: Christina had tampered with Rick's brakes, and Alexis was covering it up at any cost. What caught Lucky's attention even more was Ava's calculated involvement. He suspected that Ava wasn't just a bystander in this situation. Through financial records, overheard conversations, and carefully watching the interactions between Ava and Alexis, Lucky uncovered the full scope of the scheme. Ava had discovered Christina's crime and was now extorting Alexis, using her guilt and fear to drain her financially and emotionally. But rather than alerting the authorities or publicly exposing the conspiracy, Lucky chose a more strategic path. He knew Ava wouldn't back down in the face of legal threats, she was far too experienced for that. What she couldn't handle, however, was fear, true, personal fear. Lucky didn't just hold the evidence about Christina's actions, he also unearthed a long-buried secret from Ava's past, a connection to a mysterious, unsolved death tied to her former dealings at Jerome Gallery, a chapter Ava had worked hard to erase. On a gray and quiet afternoon, Lucky arranged a private meeting with Ava, not in a public space, but somewhere isolated near the old Cassadine estate. The conversation was calm but heavy. Lucky didn't threaten her with raised voices or ultimatums. Instead, he methodically laid out everything he knew, about Christina, about the blackmail, and most chilling of all, about the death Ava had buried under years of silence. His words were steady, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. Ava, who had bested many with her cunning, couldn't mask the panic rising inside her. She knew Lucky wasn't bluffing. He had no interest in money, power, or leverage. He simply wanted to end the cycle of lies and protect those caught in the middle. And if she pushed him, he would not hesitate to bring everything to light. Faced with the threat of exposure for not just one, but two serious crimes, blackmail and possible involvement in a suspicious death, Ava had no choice but to retreat. She withdrew her demands, stopped pressuring Alexis for money, and slowly began to disappear from the spotlight. Though she never openly admitted defeat, Ava knew she had lost this battle, not because of poor planning, but because she had underestimated someone like Lucky Spencer, composed, relentless, and incorruptible. Meanwhile, Alexis, unaware of the full extent of what had unfolded behind the scenes, felt an inexplicable weight lift off her shoulders. And somewhere in the quiet, Lucky continued to watch from afar, needing no recognition, only the reassurance that a dangerous secret had been stopped before it destroyed anyone else. Rick Lansing's silence, though intended as a temporary measure to protect the people he loved, unknowingly became the slow-burning fuse for a massive explosion brewing within his family. From the moment Rick discovered that it was Christina who had cut his brake lines, an act that bordered on attempted murder, his instincts as both a lawyer and someone who had faced countless wrongs in his life kicked in. His first reaction was to call the police, to bring the truth into the light no matter how devastating it might be. For Rick, justice was not negotiable, even when the person at fault was the daughter of a woman he once loved, and the sister of his own daughter. But Ava Jerome emerged like a shadow. She didn't just witness the chaos, she actively inserted herself into it, steering it to serve her own ends. For Ava, truth was irrelevant compared to who had control over it. When she learned of Rick's intent to contact the authorities, she acted swiftly. She didn't threaten outright, nor did she plead. All she needed to do was mention one name, Molly. Ava didn't need to say much. She only had to remind Rick what it would mean for Molly to find out that her beloved sister had nearly killed her father, and that it was her own father who had turned her sister in. That kind of betrayal would cause a rift no apology could mend. Rick, already emotionally overwhelmed, imagined the fallout and hesitated. Ava subtly painted a picture of family devastation, of irreparable heartbreak, and made Rick believe that silence was the only path to preserving what little harmony remained. In the end, Rick gave in, reluctantly, silently, and with a heavy conscience. But decisions made under emotional pressure rarely hold up. Each day that passed, Rick felt the burden of his silence grow heavier. He could no longer sleep peacefully, haunted by the fear that Molly would eventually learn the truth, not from him, but from someone else. And when that day came, Rick knew her forgiveness might never follow. Alexis Davis, meanwhile, was walking her own tightrope. In her attempt to protect Christina, she made compromises she once vowed she'd never make, covering up a potential felony, paying off a manipulative woman like Ava, and deceiving her daughters. The guilt crept in slowly but steadily. Every glance from Molly, every probing question, every awkward silence at the dinner table chipped away at Alexis's resolve. She knew she was running out of time, and she knew that if the truth didn't come from her, it would be far worse when it came from someone else. Someone like Lucky Spencer. Lucky wasn't emotionally entangled in the same way. He hadn't been swayed by guilt or manipulated by love. What made Lucky dangerous was his unwavering sense of justice and his ability to wait. He watched, listened, and gathered the facts. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Lucky didn't need to make threats like Ava or plead like Alexis. He knew the truth would eventually surface. And when it did, he would be the one to bring it forward, not out of spite, but because he could no longer stand by and let injustice fester. And while the adults played their dangerous game of secrets and silence, Molly, the most innocent of them all, began to sense that something was deeply wrong. She wasn't a child anymore. She saw through the rehearsed smiles, the sudden whispers, the way people changed the subject when she walked into a room. Molly, sharp and intuitive, began piecing together the inconsistencies. The puzzle wasn't complete yet, but she was getting close. And once she found the missing piece, whether through a slip of the tongue, a misplaced document, or a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear, the entire truth would collapse onto her like a wave. When that moment comes, there will be no more hiding. The family will fracture, trust will shatter, and those who chose to remain silent, Rick, Alexis, Ava, will have to face the fallout. At the center of it all stands Lucky Spencer, the quiet observer, holding the final truth that could bring everything crashing down, not because he wanted to destroy, but because he could no longer ignore the weight of what he knew.